Story 1. Echoes of Unease. Sarah, a 24 years old, lived with her roommate Emma in an apartment in the suburbs of Atlanta. Both women were very safety conscious, which is why they had equipped their home with a Ring peephole camera and a digital lock on the door. They believed they were being smart and proactive, but nothing could have prepared them for their new neighbor, David. About 3 months prior, the sweet little family across the hall had moved out, and David moved in. When Sarah and Emma first saw him, they were taken aback by the sight of him hauling in boxes filled with anime figurines, Star Wars posters, lightsabers, and the works. As fellow nerds, they decided to extend a friendly gesture. A few days after the moving trucks left, they put together a welcome to the neighborhood gift basket that included homemade Red Dead Redemption 2 cookies, seasonal candles, and other thoughtful items. They knocked on his door, smiled, and presented the basket, but David merely mumbled an awkward thank you and avoided eye contact. That was the extent of their interaction, leaving Sarah and Emma feeling somewhat disappointed. They understood that not everyone is an extrovert, so they figured it might be nice to have a quiet neighbor for a change, even if he seemed a bit antisocial. But it didn't take long for things to get weird. At first it was innocuous enough, annoying, but innocuous. David began emerging from his apartment every time he heard Sarah or Emma in the hallway, as if he had been waiting by the door. He would ask how they were, or if they had any spare sugar, toilet paper, or a screwdriver he could borrow. You name it, he thought of it and asked for it. Sometimes he'd knock on their door and request that they watch his apartment for an hour while he ran errands, which meant he wanted them to hang out in his apartment until he returned. They would politely decline, but it didn't seem to register with him. He would merely nod and shuffle back to his place, only to ask again a few days later. Emma started joking that he was their third roommate, but Sarah could tell she was pretty creeped out as well. Then, about a month after David moved in, everything went off the rails. It was a Saturday night, and the two had been out late partying near the Braves stadium. They stumbled home around 3 a.m., a little drunk but otherwise in control of themselves, only to freeze when they reached the landing between their apartment and David's. There he was, sitting cross-legged on the landing like some sort of yoga. As soon as he saw them, his face lit up, and he stood up before awkwardly asking where they had been. When they explained, he said he had been worried sick and that in the future, they needed to inform him if they were going out for the night. They were too stunned to process it initially, and Emma almost burst out laughing. But despite managing to hold it in, David realized she was laughing at him. His cheeks flushed as they brushed past him into their apartment. The next morning, when they reviewed the Ring footage, neither of them found it funny anymore. After they had gone inside, David hadn't left. He sat back down in the hallway facing their door and remained there for hours. The timestamp showed him either staring at their apartment door or rocking back and forth while staring at the floor until nearly 6 a.m. It was reminiscent of that scene from Paranormal Activity where the footage speeds up, but the person barely moves. It was unsettling. They called the police, but the officers were of no help. They stated they could only intervene if he made a direct threat or attempted to enter their apartment. Since it was a shared space, they couldn't do anything about him lurking on the landing outside their door. They were fairly certain the management had said something to him, though. They lodged a complaint with the complex, and for the first 5 days, there was radio silence, no knocks, no creepy hallway chats. All his strange behavior ceased for a while. They began to relax, thinking maybe he had finally gotten the hint. But they were sorely mistaken. A few weeks after his little ceasefire, just when they thought it was over, he completely lost it. He was out there constantly sitting outside their door, pacing the hallway, watching them, and mumbling unsettling things under his breath. Emma started leaving for work an hour early just to avoid him, sneaking out as if escaping from a prison. Sarah worked from home and felt trapped. Every time she opened the door to grab a package or take out the trash, there he was, waiting. He'd yell things like, "Hey, you look nice today," Or, "Why don't you come hang out with me?" Innocent-sounding remarks if one were only half listening, but they carried an unsettling implication. Then, whenever no one was within earshot, he'd make chilling comments, like the time he told Sarah, in so many words, that if she didn't come over to his apartment, he would kill them both while they slept nice and quiet, so no one would hear a thing. She was furious, but also stunned by the sudden escalation of his threats, leaving her at a loss for words. She simply speed-walked back into their apartment, shut the door, locked it, and cried until Emma got home from work. It was a total nightmare. For a long time, David began leaving notes, handwritten love letters taped to Sarah and Emma's door, slipped under it, and even stuck to their cars in the parking lot. Some of these notes were completely unhinged. One read, "I want you both to be my wives," and the idea of Emma being a sister wife would have been humorous if it weren't such a tangible and terrifying threat. Another note contained graphic content that Sarah couldn't even repeat. It made her want to gag. They soon noticed that David had installed his own Ring doorbell, angled to clearly watch their door. Every time they left and returned, a new note awaited them, and they realized he had only set up the camera to monitor when they were gone. One note said, "Missed you today," but the worst was, "You're so beautiful when you sleep." Their bedroom windows faced the back of the building, and being on the third floor, they thought there was no way he could see in. However, one night, Sarah woke up at 2 a.m. to a faint scratching sound. Terrified, she crept to the window and peeked through the blinds. She swore she saw a shadow move some dark figure lurking at the edges of the streetlight below. She convinced herself it was just a trick of the light, but fear kept her from sleeping that night. They called the police again regarding David's threats, but since the only evidence they had were his so-called nice notes, the officers said their hands were tied. The best they could do was advise them to obtain a restraining order, as if that were an instant solution. Even if they pursued it, how long would that process take, and what would David do in the meantime? In the end, they made the difficult decision to break their lease to escape and secure their safety. It cost them a significant amount of money, which was painful in its own right, but after just one night of peace in the Airbnb they rented as an interim solution, it began to feel like a loss worth enduring. They found a new place together, somewhere the neighbors weren't unstable, and lived happily ever after, until Emma moved out to live with her boyfriend, now husband. They remained good friends, but they never forgot the unsettling experience of living next to David, and Sarah doubted they ever would. Story 2. Shadows of the Trailer. In 5th grade, a new family moved into the trailer near Ethan's house. His grandpa owned the trailer and rented it out to them. They had 2 kids who were roughly his age and his brother's age, sparking excitement about meeting them. Jessica, the girl, was his age, and her little brother Jack was 9, just like Ethan's brother. At first, they seemed okay. Jessica was friendly and they got along well. Jack, however, was a different story. Their dad was a strange man. He would buy old furniture, chairs, tables, anything he could find and stack it up with trash in the backyard, then set it all on fire. This happened so often that the smell of smoke eventually faded into the background. When they finally moved out, they left behind a pile of charred junk, blackened wood and twisted metal frames. The trailer itself was a mess, with oil stains smeared across the floors and walls. One day, Ethan went inside to find Jessica. Her dad was there, shirtless, sitting in a stained chair with a beer in his hand. He looked up, his eyes hard and cold. Ethan froze, said nothing, and turned around, never to return. Before things took a dark turn, the 4 of them, Ethan, Jessica, Jack, and his brother, would ride their bikes together. Jessica was easy to talk to, and they laughed as they raced down the dirt path behind the trailer, kicking up dust. Jack tagged along, but he was nothing like his sister. Jack would show up at their house half-dressed sometimes without a shirt, often barefoot. Snot smeared across his face, which he would wipe with his arm as if it didn't bother him. Their mom caught him peeing in her flower bed more than once, yelling at him while he simply grinned and ran off. One time, he yanked the tassels on Ethan's bike as he rode. nearly causing a fall. Though annoyed, they kept letting him hang around because he was Jessica's brother. But then came the day with the bow and arrow. Ethan had no idea Jack possessed it until the boys showed up at their house, carrying a weapon that was clearly no toy. His dad hunted deer with it for real, and Jack had learned how to use it. They were in the yard, playing, when Jack pulled the string back and aimed it right at Ethan's brother's head. The arrow was knocked, the tip sharp enough to kill. Ethan's brother stood frozen, eyes wide. Ethan screamed at Jack to stop, but Jack laughed as if it were a game. He didn't shoot, but he didn't lower the bow immediately either. Their mom rushed out, saw what was happening, and lost it. She grabbed both boys and dragged them inside, declaring they weren't allowed to play with Jack and Jessica anymore. After that, Jessica and Jack kept coming over, knocking on the door and calling out their names. Ethan and his brother would sit inside in silence, waiting for them to leave. Jessica would ask why they weren't coming out, her voice small and confused, while Jack banged harder, yelling nonsense. It made both boys cry, and this continued for weeks until they finally stopped. Years later, Jack and Jessica crossed Ethan's mind unexpectedly. By then, the trailer was gone. Grandpa had hauled it off after the mess they left. Yet, he couldn't shake the memory of that pile of burnt furniture, their dad's blank stare, and the look in Jack's eyes when he aimed the bow at his brother. He wondered what it was like for Jessica and Jack living there. Their parents seemed indifferent. Jack was wild, sure, but perhaps he had never had a chance to be anything else. No one wiped his nose or told him not to pee in flowers. Jessica was different, but trapped in the same situation. As he reminisced, he remembered one night waking up to a sound outside his window. It was late, the house dark and still. Pulling back the curtain, he saw someone moving near the trees, someone too small to be an adult. He squinted and thought he saw Jack's messy hair and skinny frame. Story 3. Whispers of Innocence. Alex grew up in a small town in Illinois, a place where everyone knew everyone else's business. He and his sister were close in age. She was 5, and he was 7. They spent countless hours playing outside in their quiet neighborhood, where their mother felt comfortable letting them roam as long as they stayed within earshot of her calls. Looking back, Alex felt that the early 70s were a simpler time, a time when children could explore freely without fear. Across the street lived Mr. Vesky, an older man in his 50s or 60s with graying hair and thick glasses that magnified his eyes. He didn't speak much, but he would wave at the kids when they saw him in his yard or on his porch. To Alex and his sister, he was just the friendly neighbor who occasionally offered to take them for ice cream. Their mother welcomed the break, grateful for the chance to relax while Mr. Vesky walked them to the nearby ice cream parlor, a charming little shop with a red and white awning. The trips became a weekly routine. Mr. Vesky would buy them cones, and they would sit on the bench outside, enjoying their treats while he watched them. Alex never felt uncomfortable. To him, it was simply free ice cream from a nice old man. His sister felt the same way. They were innocent children who didn't dwell on the implications of their outings. Then one day, their mother announced that they were moving. It all happened so suddenly. She described their new home as a fun place, and before they knew it, their belongings were packed, and they were on their way. Their new apartment in a bigger town felt strange, and Alex missed their old house, the yard, and the quiet streets. He and his sister were more worried about fitting in at new schools than the reasons behind the move. Years passed, and during his junior year of high school, Alex's mother finally revealed the truth about Mr. Vesky. They were sitting in the living room when she asked if they remembered the man who used to take them for ice cream. When they nodded, she told them he was a registered offender. Horrified, Alex and his sister bombarded their mother with questions, demanding to know why she had allowed them to go with him in the first place. She explained that at the time, she had no idea about his past. There were no national databases then, and the only state with such a registry was California. She only learned of Mr. Vesky's history after a neighbor warned her. The townspeople had planned to take matters into their own hands once they discovered the truth. Alex's mother had to act quickly to protect her children, fearing for their safety and their mental well-being. She didn't want them to be near Mr. Vesky or the rage of the community that eventually led to his lynching. Hearing this revelation years later hit Alex hard. He realized how close they had come to danger. Mr. Vesky had always seemed harmless, and Alex couldn't recall any unsettling incidents during their ice cream outings. He and his sister felt lucky, but it was unsettling to think about what could have happened if circumstances had been different. After that incident, their mother became stricter and more protective. Alex initially attributed this to their new surroundings, but he later realized it stemmed from her fear of what had transpired. Small towns are often thought to be safe, but this experience shattered that illusion for Alex. His mother had believed that moving to a small town would guarantee their safety, but she felt guilty for not realizing the danger sooner. A few years later, Alex looked up Mr. Vesky online and found his name still listed on the registry. He had been convicted shortly before they moved in. Alex hesitated to delve deeper, knowing that just seeing his name was unsettling enough. Eventually, he discovered that Mr. Vesky's name had been removed from the registry, which only happens upon proof of death. It dawned on Alex that Mr. Vesky was no longer alive, and he was left with a sense of unease regarding what had happened. The memories of that ice cream shop, once a place of joy, were now tainted. Alex could still visualize it, the sticky cones, the hot pavement under his sneakers, and Mr. Vesky watching them as they enjoyed their ice creams. He pondered what motivated Mr. Vesky to take them out and why he had chosen them. Perhaps he hadn't acted on his impulses because he couldn't, or maybe he simply never had the chance. Regardless, a shadow loomed over those memories. Alex and his sister occasionally revisited the topic, acknowledging how fortunate they were to have escaped unscathed. They had never returned to that town, unsure if the ice cream shop still existed. Alex knew he wouldn't want to see it again. It was better left in the past, along with Mr. Vesky and his quiet house across the street. When Alex was in middle school, new neighbors moved in next door. His mother spoke of them as if they were saints because they had 2 adopted kids, which was seen as a commendable act. However, it didn't take long for the neighborhood to realize something was off. One Saturday afternoon, the neighbor lady visited. Alex answered the door and overheard her conversation with his mother. The lady apologized for the noise, claiming her children were always screaming and crying, but Alex and his mom hadn't heard anything unusual. Weeks later, a shocking incident occurred. On a Sunday, while Alex was inside playing Atari, his father burst into the house, saying he heard screaming from next door. He rushed out, and Alex later learned that the neighbor's young son had been found unresponsive. The neighborhood was soon engulfed in tragedy. Initial reports suggested an accident, with the mother claiming the boy had fallen and hit his head. However, as more police arrived and began to investigate, it became clear that something darker was at play. Rumors circulated that the mother had beaten her son to death and staged it as an accident. Alex listened as his parents discussed the unfolding events. His mother was shaken, struggling to comprehend how such a thing could happen so close to home. His father's silence was even more unsettling. For days, police swarmed the neighbor's house, and news reporters knocked on doors, seeking information. Alex's parents advised him to stay quiet, so he did, absorbing bits of information from the community and the news. Eventually, it became apparent that the mother had murdered her son, and the investigation revealed a history of abuse. People learned that the couple had been reported multiple times to Child Protective Services, and the children had arrived with visible bruises. The couple had moved to escape their past, but their secrets caught up with them. In a shocking twist, Alex discovered that the children were never legally adopted. They had been purchased. The term purchased haunted Alex, as it implied a transaction devoid of care or love. No one knew the true origins of the children, and the police could not piece together the details because the couple remained uncooperative. The husband escaped murder charges, but faced consequences for neglect. This dark chapter in Alex's life served as a harsh reminder that the world was not as safe as it seemed, from the perspective of a teenager. Story 4. Shadows of the Past. When Lucas was 8 years old, his world was shattered by an incident that would haunt him for years. One Tuesday evening in late October, after a long day at work, his father returned home, unloading groceries from the car. Lucas was inside, engrossed in a cartoon, when he heard a loud bang. Initially, he thought it was just the screen door slamming, but then he heard his father yelling. Rushing to the window, Lucas's heart dropped as he saw a man pointing a gun at his father's chest. It was their neighbor, a man who lived just 3 houses down. In a flash, the neighbor demanded his father's wallet and car keys before darting into the woods behind their house. Lucas's father stumbled inside, pale and visibly shaken, and immediately called the police. They apprehended the neighbor that night, finding him hiding in a shed about a mile away, still armed and in possession of the stolen items. The police informed them that he had been drinking and needed money for more alcohol. He was sentenced to prison for armed robbery, and for a time Lucas felt a sense of relief. He no longer had to see that rusted pickup truck parked down the street or hear the neighbor's dog barking in the shadows. However, the memory of that night lingered, vivid and unsettling. Lucas couldn't shake the image of the gun, glinting ominously under the porch light, or the sight of his father's trembling hands raised in surrender. 5 years later, when Lucas was 13, he discovered that their neighbor had been released from prison. He found out one afternoon when he spotted that same rusted pickup truck parked in the driveway. Panic gripped him, twisting his stomach into knots. He rushed inside to tell his father, who was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and the newspaper. When Lucas relayed the news, his father looked tired but unperturbed. He explained that the neighbor had served his time and had every right to return home. Lucas was frustrated. He didn't care about the neighbor's rights. All he could think about was that gun and how close the man had come to taking his only surviving parent away from him. Lucas's mother had passed away from a rare form of cancer when he was still a baby. That first night after the neighbor's return, Lucas couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house sent him jumping, and he repeatedly checked the locks on the windows. His father noticed Lucas's anxiety and tried to reassure him, saying the neighbor wasn't likely to do anything foolish again, especially with the police watching. He also mentioned that people could change and they had to give him a chance. Lucas nodded but found it hard to believe. All he could envision was the neighbor's wild eyes and the way he had waved the gun as if he had already decided to kill. Nightmares soon followed. Lucas dreamed of the neighbor breaking into their home with the gun, and in those dreams, his father was never there to protect him. He would wake up drenched in sweat, heart racing, staring at the ceiling until dawn broke through his window. This cycle continued for weeks and then months, taking a toll on Lucas's health. He began to avoid riding his bike past the neighbor's house, taking the long way around the block to keep from even glancing at it. It frustrated him to feel so scared, and he felt powerless to change it. The neighbor stayed in that house for 2 more years. Lucas suggested they move, but his father said they couldn't afford it. He had no idea what the man did all day, probably nothing, as his truck rarely moved. Then one spring, when Lucas was 15, he noticed a for sale sign in the yard. A few weeks later, the truck was gone, and the house stood empty. It felt like a small miracle, as if his many prayers had finally been answered. His father mentioned that the neighbor had moved to another state, possibly to live with family. Lucas didn't care where he went, as long as he was gone. Although the nightmares didn't cease immediately, they became less frequent over time. Eventually, Lucas found he could walk past that house without his heart racing and his legs urging him to flee. It still stood there, but it no longer felt like the neighbor's. Yet, a small part of Lucas's memory remained occupied by that man, and he often wished he could simply forget. Story 5. The Unseen Presence. When Jamie was a child, their parents often worked long hours in the film industry, which meant spending time with Grandma. Jamie cherished those serene mornings spent with her, who rose early each day. However, shortly after starting 4th grade, strange occurrences began to unfold in her house. It all started when Grandma noticed that the receiver of the old corded phone next to her bed was frequently off the base. This was a heavy handset from the 80s, complete with a coiled cord. Each time she returned home from work, she found the phone either dangling or resting on the table, never properly hung up. Initially, she attributed it to Jamie, claiming they must have been using it after school. Despite Jamie's protests of innocence, she would say, "Well, who else could it have been, sweetie?" This went on for weeks. Each day she would come home, check the phone, and express her annoyance. Jamie felt increasingly frustrated. They had no reason to touch that phone. They didn't call anyone, nor did anyone call them. While Grandma's irritation grew, Jamie felt the weight of her accusations bearing down on them. One afternoon, Jamie returned home earlier than usual. To understand why they felt so uneasy, one must visualize the house. The front door opened directly into the living room, where the dining room, kitchen doorway, and stairs to the bedrooms could be seen. Upstairs, Grandma's room was on the left, Jamie's on the right, with a small bathroom at the end. The narrow windows, which cranked open and had old screens, were dusty and dimly lit by the afternoon sun. As Jamie stepped inside, a chill ran down their spine. The house was eerily quiet, devoid of the usual sounds of life. They felt a strange sensation, as if someone were watching them. Jamie shook off the feeling and headed upstairs to Grandma's room. When Grandma came home, she sensed Jamie's unease. "Everything all right, dear?" she asked, her brow furrowed with concern. Jamie nodded, though their hearts raced. That night, as they settled into bed, the unsettling feeling returned. They lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the creaks and groans of the old house. Days turned into weeks, and the occurrences intensified. One evening, while Grandma was at work, Jamie heard distinct thuds coming from the hallway. Heart pounding, they glanced toward the door, half expecting to see someone standing there. But there was only darkness. When Grandma returned, she found the phone once again off the hook, the cord stretched out across the floor. Jamie's stomach churned with anxiety as they watched her frustration boil over. "This is getting ridiculous," she exclaimed, shaking her head. "I swear, it's like the phone has a mind of its own." That night, both uneasy, they decided to set up an old tape recorder aimed at the phone. The plan was simple. Leave it running while they went out for a while and see if it captured anything strange. They spent the day at a local diner, trying to distract themselves with pancakes, but neither of them could finish their meal. Upon returning home, they climbed the stairs together, Grandma's hand gripping Jamie's tightly. In her room, she hit stop on the recorder, rewound the tape, and pressed play. At first, there was only static and the faint hum of the house. Grandma fast-forwarded, stopping intermittently. Then, about 20 minutes in, they heard distinct thuds, clear as day, like someone was stepping across the floor. Grandma's grip tightened on Jamie's shoulder as they listened in disbelief. A soft click followed, likely the sound of the phone lifting from its base. But then, silence enveloped the room. No voices, no breathing, just an oppressive stillness that felt alive. Once the tape hissed to a stop, they exchanged horrified glances. "That's it," Grandma said, her voice trembling. "We're getting out of here." She didn't call the police. She believed they would simply dismiss it as a prank. Instead, she packed a bag for both of them, and they drove to Jamie's aunt's place about an hour away. Jamie didn't argue. They wanted to escape that house. A few days later, Grandma received a call from her neighbor, Mr. Haxel, who had been keeping an eye on the house. He mentioned that he had gone to water the plants and found the phone off the hook again, the cord stretched out flat on the floor. Nothing else was disturbed, no broken locks, no open windows, just the phone. Grandma thanked him, hung up, and politely informed him that his services were no longer required. Jamie knew she had explained nothing, leaving Mr. Haxel baffled. When Jamie asked why, Grandma replied that she didn't want to scare him. They stayed with Jamie's aunt for the remainder of the school year. A few months later, Grandma sold the house, letting a realtor handle everything. never stepping foot inside again. The new owners never mentioned anything strange, at least not that Jamie heard. And still, Jamie sometimes wondered if the unseen presence had truly vanished or if it lingered, waiting for the next chance to be part of someone else's life. Story 6. Breaking Free. In a cramped basement apartment, a woman named Emma found herself living beneath a volatile landlord, Ryan, who was often drunk and angry. At first, life had been bearable, especially with Ryan's partner and her 2 children living above, acting as a buffer. But when they left, Emma was left alone to face Ryan's wrath. The tension escalated when Emma accidentally tossed an Amazon box into Ryan's recycling bin without breaking it down. Instead of a simple complaint, Ryan unleashed a torrent of insults, leaving Emma shaken. After enduring months of hostility, she finally blocked his number and tried to ignore him. Unfortunately, Ryan's aggression only intensified. Parking was a constant battle. Emma worked nights and often returned home to find Ryan's car blocking her in. One night, she parked behind him, assuming he wouldn't need to leave so late. But just as she settled into bed, Ryan began pounding on her door, screaming her name. When she reluctantly stepped outside to move her car, he followed, hurling insults and threats. Fed up, Emma decided she needed to escape. She set her sights on moving by October, but the looming expense felt daunting. One day, everything changed. Ryan's 19-year-old daughter, who usually stayed with her mother, was home. Emma had seen her leave earlier, but that night the girl's bedroom was above hers, and the window was open. Emma's TV was set to a reasonable volume, but she knew Ryan's daughter could hear it. After a brief exchange filled with hostility, Emma snapped, calling the girl disrespectful. The response was a barrage of insults, mirroring her father's aggression. The next morning, Emma was jolted awake by heavy footsteps pacing above her bed. Ryan was alone in the house, and the ominous feeling settled in her chest. As the days passed, Emma noticed scratches on her window, thin, jagged marks, as if someone had dragged something sharp across the glass. Panic set in, and she began packing her belongings faster, counting down the days until August ended. But the nights grew increasingly harrowing. One night, she heard low, steady breathing right outside her window. She didn't dare look, fearing what she might see. Instead, she turned the TV on at a low volume, trying to drown out the sound. After what felt like an eternity, the breathing stopped, but sleep remained elusive. The following day, Emma found a note slipped under her door, a crude drawing of a stick figure with a knife in its chest. Her hand trembled as she crumpled it up and called the police again. They arrived, glanced at the note, and assured her they would speak to Ryan. But Emma could see their indifference. Determined to escape, Emma made a plan to leave by the end of August. On the last day of the month, she loaded her final box into her car, driving away from the nightmare that had become her life. Emma found a new home, a small, quiet unit on the second floor of a building with no shared walls and no looming threats above her. That first night, she opened the window, letting in the cool night air, and listened to the distant hum of traffic. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of tension lift from her shoulders. As she unpacked slowly, embracing the peace that had been stolen from her, Emma realized that Ryan was gone from her life. Finally, she was free. Story 7. Quiet Neighbors. When Taylor was in middle school, new neighbors moved in next door, and the excitement in the neighborhood was palpable. Taylor's mom spoke of them as if they were saints, especially since they had adopted 2 children. But it didn't take long for things to take a dark turn. One Saturday afternoon, the neighbor lady came over and Taylor answered the door. They overheard her conversation with Taylor's mom, where she apologized for any noise. She claimed her kids were always screaming and crying, but Taylor found that puzzling. They had never heard anything unusual from their house. Taylor's mom nodded politely, brushing it off as just an odd introduction. A few weeks later, everything changed. It was a Sunday, and Taylor was inside, absorbed in their Atari, when Taylor's dad rushed in, urgency etched on his face. "Did you hear that?" he asked, but Taylor hadn't heard a thing. Taylor's dad quickly put on his boots and dashed out. Later, Taylor learned that he had heard screams from the neighbor's house. When he arrived, he found the lady in a frenzy, crying out that her younger son was unresponsive on the ground. The police arrived, and soon after, the neighborhood buzzed with whispers. Initially, it was considered a tragic accident. The lady claimed her son had fallen and hit his head on the concrete patio. But the next day, more police arrived, not just the regular officers, but unmarked cars as well. Yellow tape was strung around the house, and the atmosphere shifted from tragedy to suspicion. Rumors began to circulate. Someone mentioned that they didn't believe the boy had fallen, and speculation ran rampant. Taylor overheard their parents discussing it in hushed tones. Taylor's mother was shaken, unable to comprehend how something so horrific could happen so close to home. Taylor's father remained eerily quiet, which felt more unsettling than his mother's distress. For days, the police swarmed the neighbor's house. News vans and reporters knocked on doors, seeking information about the family. Taylor's parents warned him not to talk to them, so he listened instead, piecing together bits of information shared through the neighborhood grapevine and local news. Slowly, the grim truth emerged. The lady had murdered her adopted son. The autopsy revealed that the boy hadn't just fallen, he had suffered severe abuse. As investigations continued, it was uncovered that the couple had moved to their street to escape their past. Neighbors from their previous home, an hour away, had reported them to Child Protective Services multiple times. Stories surfaced of the children showing up with bruises and the couple dodging questions about their origins. In the 1980s, before the internet made information easily accessible, it was possible to bury one's past, and that's what they had attempted to do. The biggest revelation came during the trial. The children weren't legally adopted. The couple hadn't gone through any agency or court. They had simply purchased them. That word haunted Taylor. It suggested something so dehumanizing, as if the children were mere objects. No one knew for sure where the kids had come from. Some speculated it was a shady deal with a desperate mother, while others feared it was worse, involving human trafficking. While the husband wasn't charged with murder, he faced charges related to neglect. But the lady received a life sentence, and the trial concluded swiftly. The family left the house, which sat empty and neglected, with overgrown grass and dark windows, resembling a haunted house. Eventually, new neighbors moved in, and life returned to normal. But Taylor never forgot, nor did anyone else in the neighborhood. Looking back, it was chilling to realize how close it had all been. The house was just 50 feet away, and he had ridden his bike past it countless times, seeing those children who seemed quiet and normal. No one had thought twice about it. The entire ordeal lasted only 4 or 5 months, from the day the couple moved in to the day the police took them away. Now, years later, it felt like a distant memory, but the impact lingered. Taylor had witnessed a murder investigation unfold right across the street. Reflecting on it, he realized how easy it was for people to hide back then. There were no online records or instant background checks. One could simply move to a new town and start fresh as if nothing had happened. They almost got away with it too. If the lady hadn't killed that boy, if Taylor's dad hadn't heard her screaming, who knows how long they could have continued their charade? Just thinking about it made Taylor feel sick. Those children never stood a chance. The boy lost his life, and the girl, wherever she ended up, had to carry the weight of those memories with her, all because 2 people believed they could buy children and treat them like possessions. It was a harrowing tale, and Taylor rarely shared it. Most people preferred to avoid such darkness, but it was real. It happened, and it became his first lesson in understanding that the world wasn't as safe or simple as it appeared from the comfort of a middle school bedroom window. Thanks for watching till the end. Did you enjoy this topic? Let us know in the comments below. See you in the next video.